This has been one of the scariest events of my life, as well as the most mysterious. Let me tell you about what happened to me and my friend that night. There's tons of small towns spread across the massive state of Texas, many of which consist of less than 100 people, a church, and a post office. About 4 years ago, my friend Jordan and I came across a very strange and peculiar town. For the past few months, we had been going on these small road trips every other weekend to do some late-night exploring of these small towns. We made it a point to visit each local cemetery, especially the ones that had historical significance. We mostly did this for the thrill, but still interested in the history aspect. Before this particular night, I had done a little research to find a really remote town. I found an obscure website dedicated to Texas towns with extremely low populations and little to no economic growth. Borderline ghost towns. After doing some digging, I found what I thought to be a gem. The destination was Leo, a small unincorporated town in northwestern Texas, 15 miles from the nearest main road or highway in any direction. Population 20. We set off a little later than usual that night, around 7 p.m. We had about a 90-minute drive. We were at the point in the drive where we started to deviate from the main road onto the small country roads. According to Google Maps, we were about 20 minutes away. This is where the drive started to get creepy, as streetlights start to become non-existent and it gets eerily dark and quiet. We stop at a fork in the road after about 5 minutes of driving on a narrow dirt road. In the middle of the fork was a deteriorated wooden sign with Leo 5 miles this way crudely painted on it. We follow the arrow to the right. I rolled the window down and noticed how quiet it was. Not even the sounds of distant cars or planes could be heard. True dead silence. We started noticing a few houses come into view through dense trees. Jordan slowed down the car as we came into the town. The first few houses looked very old and decrepit, and had no signs of life. According to the map, the cemetery was at the end of the road just before leaving the town. We both looked at each other and were thinking the same thing. This was a very unusual little place. It's hard to believe there's still towns in existence like this. We started to get excited, creeped out, but excited. We came upon a house on our left where a young kid was sitting on the porch while 2 adults were loading large bags filled with something into the bed of a truck. Nothing super strange at the time, but looking back at the whole situation, something more to the eye was definitely going on. We kept driving along as they stared us down. I looked back and noticed the kid abruptly get up and run into the house. Moments later, the lights on the porch and in the house went out. I kept staring back as Jordan drove on. I noticed the 2 adults had stopped what they were doing and casually walked into the house, lights still out. My friend suggested we skip this cemetery and just drive on through. Something just didn't seem right, he said, and I agreed with him. But I convinced him we should still check it out. My first mistake. A few more houses passed on our right, and then nothing but trees for a good 100 yards. Finally, on the left side of the road, a wooden frame appeared with the words, Leo Cemetery, written on top. We were trying to find the best place to pull over and park when I noticed a faint glow coming from within the cemetery grounds. It was a soft orange glow, like the flickering of a campfire. I told Jordan to quickly turn off the lights. We slowly drove the car up the road a little more, pulled over and parked halfway on the road, the other half on the embankment. Once outside, it felt even more eerie, and neither of us really liked it. But the thrill of exploring a creepy cemetery was just too exciting for us to leave. We slowly walked into the cemetery grounds toward the light. As we got closer, we started to hear some faint chatter, although now that I recall it, it was more like a steady mumbling drone. Jordan was starting to act all nervous about leaving his car on the edge of the road and wanted to go back. I tried to convince him to at least see what the glow was from, but he said he would wait by the cemetery sign so he could at least be in view of his car. Whatever, I continued on. A little farther in, I got to the top of a mound and crouched. About 20 to 30 yards away, I could see what looked like people sitting around a campfire. There's no way people were camping out here. I quietly moved a little closer to hide behind a tree. I looked back, and at this point, I could no longer see Jordan. Now that I was closer, I could make out what it was. What I thought was a campfire was actually a bunch of candles. There was about 25 of them, arranged very neatly in a perfect circle. Sitting around the circle of candles was about a dozen people, all wearing robes with hoods. That wasn't even the weirdest part. 2 people were in the middle digging in the ground. I couldn't make out words, but it sounded like they were all chanting something in unison. Suddenly, my phone rang. Without hesitation, I pulled it out of my pocket and immediately silenced it. Then, as if on cue, everyone around that circle looked in my direction. With their faces illuminated by the candlelight, I could see they were all wearing masks that looked like horrifying, deformed animal skulls. I froze for a second while fixated on their grotesque faces, when suddenly 2 of them started approaching. I bolted back to the car without looking back. As I was approaching the cemetery entrance, I couldn't see Jordan. Then I noticed to my right a big bright row of headlights coming closer from the road. Jordan was already in the car with his head out the window, yelling at me to hurry up. I jumped in the car and sped off. He told me he tried calling to warn about the truck. After maybe 50 yards, Jordan slammed on his brakes. In front of us, in the middle of the road, was something standing still, wearing a hood over their animal mask and holding a shovel. We both looked behind us. Jordan was about to slam it in reverse when a huge truck came to a sliding stop behind us. 3 people were sitting on the edge of the tailgate. To my horror, piled high in the bed of the truck was stacks upon stacks of body bags. The 3 people jumped out of the bed of the truck. One of them was holding a bat. It was too dark to see any of their faces. With the bright lights from the truck illuminating the area in front of us, I could see in the field up ahead the dark outlines of 2 figures standing on top of an old storm cellar, watching us. I was about to dial 911 when the driver jumped out and walked towards Jordan's window. Jordan flinched back, expecting a blow to the window, but instead, the masked stranger pressed a piece of paper up against it. All that it said was, "Leave and never come back. You saw nothing. We can find you." He walked back into the truck, and the others followed. The person in the middle of the road was gone. Jordan slammed on the pedal and we drove off. The bright lights from the truck didn't move the whole time until we couldn't see it. We drove straight home, never returning near that area again.